Welcome to this architecture. You are watching VLSI design lecture series. Today we are going to focus on memory architectures on building blocks. And this is what memory architecture looks like. So it consists of number of word lines, each have some unique specific address, and we can do either read or write operation in random access memory, but only read operation in read only memory. And the memory consists of two address decoders like row and column decoders to select a particular bit in the memory. If there are m rows and n columns, then the number of bits that can be accessed are 2 power m plus n. Either a read operation or a write operation can be done on any selected bit by the use of control signals. And this is the array structured memory architecture, which has both row decoder and sense amplifier and column decoder. Larger memory suffer from speed degradation as the length and capacitance and resistance of the word and bit lines become large. So the memory is partitioned into p smaller blocks. A word is selected on the basis of the row and column address that are broadcast to all the blocks. An extra address word called block address select one of the p blocks to be read or written. And this is how a hierarchical memory architecture can be configured. So here the memory is partitioned into p smaller blocks. The composition of each of the individual block is identical to one, and a word selected on the basis of the row and column address that are broadcast to all the blocks. An extra address word called the block address selects one of the p blocks to be read or written. This approach has a dual advantage. One is the length of the local word and bit lines, that is the length of the lines within the blocks is kept within the bounds, resulting in faster access times. The block address can be used to activate only the addressed block, and non-active blocks are put in power saving mode with the sense amplifiers and row and column decoders disabled. This results in a substantial power saving that is desirable since participation is a major concern in a very large memories. Multiple variants of the proposed architectures are possible, and variations include the positioning of the sense amplifiers, the partitioning of the word and bit lines. And now let us focus on memory core. And the memory core is nothing but the major parts of the memory system. While the most of the compelling issue in designing the larger memory is to keep the size of the cell as small as possible, and this should be done so that the other important design quality measures such as speed and reliability are not fatally affected. In sequence, we are going to discuss now the read-only, non-volatile and rated memory cores. And while the idea of memory that can only be read and never altered might seem odd at first, but second glance reveals a large number of potential applications. So programs for processors with fixed applications such as washing machines, calculators, and game machines, once developed and debugged, need only reading. Fixing the contents of the at manufacturing time leads to small and fast implementation. The fact that the contents of the ROM cell are permanently fixed considerably simplifies its design. So the cell shall be designed so that a 0 or 1 is presented to the bit line upon activation of its word line. And now you can see the several ways to accomplish this, that is NOR and NAND ROMs. So the two different types of implementation of ROM array is a NOR based ROM array and NAND based ROM array. In NOR based ROM array, there are two different ways to implement the mass ROM. You can consider a 4-bit memory, 4 by 4 bit memory. Here each column consists of a pseudo NMOS NOR gate driven by some of the row signals, that is the word line. And as we know, only one word line is activated at a time by raising its voltage to VDD, while all other rows are held at low voltage levels. if an active transistor exists at the cross point of the column and selected row, the column voltage is pulled down to logic low level by that transistor. So you can see in this diagram, if the row lines are 1 0 0 0, then column lines will be 1 0 1 1, and if the row lines are 0 1 0 0, the column lines will be 0 1 1 0, because in the center two rows there is no transistors. If no active transistor exists at the cross point, the column voltage is pulled high by the PMOS load device. Thus, a logic 1 bit is stored as the absence of the active transistor, while a logic 0 bit is stored at the presence of the active transistor at the cross point. In these types of ROM array, NAND based ROM arrays, each bit line consists of a depletion load NAND gate driven by some of the row signals, that is the word signals. In normal operation, all word lines are held at the logic high level except for the selected line, which is pulled down to logic low level. So if a transistor exists at the cross point of the column and selected row, that transistor is turned off and the column voltage is pulled high by the load device. So that is shown in this diagram. So if the row 1 is selected, the column output will be 0 1 0 0, because the transistor exists in the second column only. And if the inputs are 1 0 1 1, then the output will be, that is, which means that the row 2 is selected, so the output will be 1 0 0 1, because the transistor exists in the first and fourth column, and the second and third columns have no transistor. So on the other hand, if no transistor exists at that particular cross point, the column voltage is pulled low by the other NMOS transistors in the multi-input NAND structure. Thus, a logic 1 bit is stored by the presence of the transistor that can be deactivated, while a logic 0 bit is stored by a shorted or normally on transistor at that cross point. So as in the NOR ROM case, the NAND based ROM array can be fabricated initially with a transistor connection present at every row column selection. 0 point is then stored by lowering the threshold voltage of the corresponding NMOS transistors at the cross point through a channel implementation, and so that the transistor remains on regardless of the gate voltage. Now let us move on to non-volatile read-write memories. So the architecture virtually identical to ROM structure, and the memory core consists of an array of transistors placed on a wide line grid, and the memory is programmed by selectively diffusing disabling or enabling some of those devices. So it is a ROM that is accomplished by mask level alterations in a non-volatile read-write memory, that is NVRW. Modified transistor that permits its threshold level to be altered electrically is used instead. The modified threshold is independently even when the supply voltage is turned off. So to reprogram the memory, the program values must be erased, after which a new program can be written into it. So the architecture of NVRW memories is virtually identical, and the method of erasing is the main differentiating factor between the various classes of reprogrammable non-volatile memories. The programming of memory is typically an order of magnitude slower than the reading operation. Now we'll start with the floating gate transistor, which is the device at the heart of the majority of the reprogrammable memories. And over the years, various attempts have been made with electrically alterable characteristics and enough reliability to support the multitude of write cycle. For example, the MNOS, that is metal nitride oxide semiconductor transistor, held promise but has been unsuccessful until now. So in this device, the threshold modifying electrons are trapped in Si3 and 4 layer deposited on the top of the gate SiO2. So a more accepted solution is offered by the floating gate transistor, which forms the core of the virtually every NVRW memory built today. The structure is similar to traditional MOS device except that an extra polysilicon strip is inserted between the gate and the channel, as you can see in this diagram. So this strip is not connected to anything and is called floating gate. The most obvious impact of inserting an extra gate is to decide the is to double the gate oxide thickness TOX, which results in a reduced device transconductance as well as the increased threshold voltage. Both these parameters are not particularly desirable. From other points of view, this active device acts as a normal transistor. Most important, this device has the interesting property that the threshold voltage is programmable. Applying a high voltage between source and gate drain terminals creates a high electric field and causes the avalanche injection to occur. Electrons acquire sufficient energy to become hot and traverse through the first oxide insulator so that they get trapped on the floating gate. This phenomenon can occur with oxides as thick as 100 nanometer, which makes it relatively easy to fabricate the device. In reference to the programming mechanism, the floating gate transistor is often called floating gate avalanche injection MOS, and the trapping of the electron on the floating gate effectively drops the voltage on that gate. The process is self-limiting. The negative charge accumulated on the floating gate reduces the electric field over the oxide so that ultimately it becomes incapable of accelerating any more hot electrons. Removing the voltage leaves the induced negative charge in place and results in negative voltage on the intermediate gate. From a device point of view, this translates into an effective increase in threshold voltage. To turn on the device, higher voltage is needed to overcome the effect of the induced negative charge. Typically, the resulting threshold voltage is around 7 volt, and thus 5 volt gate source voltage is not sufficient to turn on the transistor, and the device is effectively disabled. The charge injected onto the floating gate effectively shifts the IV curves of the transistors. So curve A is for the 0 state, while curve B stands for the transistor with the VT shift representing the 1 state. It can be established that the value of the VT shift is expressed as delta VT is equal to minus of delta QFG divided by CFC. So since the floating gate is surrounded by SiO2, which is an excellent insulator, the trapped charge can be stored for many years even when the supply voltage is removed, creating a non-volatile storage mechanism. One of the major concerns of the floating gate approach is the need for high programming voltages. By tailoring the impurity profiles, technologists have been able to reduce the required voltage from the original 25 volt to approximately 12.4 volt in today's memory. Virtually all non-volatile memories are currently based on the floating gate approach only. So different classes can be identified based on the Ensor mechanism. And now let us focus on erasable programmable read-only memory. An EEPROM is erased by shining ultraviolet light on the cells through a transparent window in the package. The UV radiation renders the oxide slightly conductive by the direct generation of the electron hole pass in the material. The erasure process is slow and can take seconds to several minutes depending upon the intensity of UV source. Programming takes several minutes depending upon the IP source and programming. Another problem with this approach is the limited endurance, that is the number of erase program cycles is generally limited to a maximum of 1000, mainly as a result of the UV erasing procedure. So reliability is also an issue, and the device threshold might vary with the repeated programming cycles, and most EEPROM memories therefore contain an on-chip circuitry to control the value of the threshold to within a specified range during programming. Finally, the injection always entails a large channel current as high as 0.5 milliamps at a control gate of 12.5 volt. This causes the high power dissipation during programming. On the other hand, the EEPROM cell is extremely simple and dense, making it possible to fabricate large memories at low cost. EEPROMs were therefore attractive in applications that do not require the regular programming. Due to the cost and reliability issues, EEPROM have failures out of favor and have been replaced by the flash memories. And the major disadvantage of EEPROM approach is that the erasure procedure has to occur off system. This means that the memory has to be removed from the board and placed in a EEPROM programmer for programming. The EEPROM approach avoids this labor-intensive and annoying procedure by using another mechanism to inject or remove charges from a floating gate called tunneling. A modified floating gate device is called FloatOx transistors used as a programmable device that supports the electrical erasing procedure, and it resembles a farmer's device, that is floating gate device, except that a portion of the dielectric separating the floating gate from the channel and drain is reduced in thickness to about 10 nanometer or less. And a voltage of approximately 10 volt is applied over the thin insulator. Electrons travel to and from the floating gate through a mechanism called Fowler-Nordin tunneling. The main advantage of this programming approach is that it is reversible. That is, erasing is simply achieved by reversing the voltage applied during the writing process. Injecting electrons onto the floating gate raises the threshold, which the reverse operation lowers the VT. This bidirectionality, however, introduces a threshold control problem. Removing too much charge from the floating gate results in a depletion device that cannot be turned off by the standard word lines. And you can notice that the resulting threshold voltage depends on the initial charge on the gate as well as the applied programming voltage. And this is how a FloatOx transistor looks like. And to remedy this problem, an extra transistor has to be connected in series with the floating gate transistor, and this transistor acts as an access device during the read operation, while the FloatOx transistor performs the storage function. Thank you.